Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast, where we promote, educate, inspire, and entertain creators of all things related to fantasy and science fiction. Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me William Hastings, who is a fantasy YA author. William, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Thanks, Carson. Glad to be here. My name's William. I write YA fantasy novels, specifically dark fantasy novels, a coming of age epic series called Vagabond Legacy. The first installment, The Crimson Spark, is now available both on Amazon and on Audible, read by anime superstar Vic Mignogna. It's a wonderful production. I hope you all check it out.
Fantastic. Where did the genesis of this novel come from? Well, the series, I guess.
Yes, this series actually began production about 10 years ago. I've been working on it for a very, very long time. It's intended to be 8 books,
Oh, wow.
the second of which is wrapping up completion right now. Um, they are fantasy novels that explore coming of age in a very dark and difficult setting,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with trauma and mental illness, and rising above it. And it's about the effects of abuse on the developing mind and how that affects a character and that sort of thing. It comes a lot from my work outside of writing, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud to be a part of it.
So these are very deep subjects that I think a lot of teens go through. This is a lot different than, you're designed to be a prince or something, and we're going to get that heritage. How did you come up with this subject?
Well, it starts with a character. I didn't start with anything other than a character,
Mm-hmm.
and everything sort of formed around that character. He's the protagonist, and he's a troubled boy with a complicated history, and the whole draw of the plot is to see him grow and change and become a hero.
Okay. So when you started with this character, did he just pop in your mind and you go, okay, like I need to sit down and kind of write his story, and you just sat down, or did you have
It's
different
almost
elements?
exactly what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's almost exactly what happened. I had a character in mind and a location in mind, not a setting, but a specific location. I had an idea for this boy who was on a ship going to a place he didn't understand, and it became this monster of an idea that I've been working on for the better part of half of my life now.
So you said there's going to be 8 books. Do you now have like an outline of things that are going to happen, or do you just have guideposts?
Yes, yes, they've all been outlined. They're all planned out. A lot of the covers are finished. It's just a question of getting them done. I recently had another book launch on Indiegogo. It was a wonderful success, and that's going to be coming out later this year. I had to put Vagabond Legacy on the shelf until that was ready. But hopefully, when that's done, when that ships, which should be sometime in June, I'll be able to get back to it.
Okay. So what are your writing habits?
My writing habits are honestly all over the place. I write whenever I can. I have a very busy job, so
Mm-hmm.
I try to write whenever possible. I'll write by hand and then transcribe it later. I'll write on the backs of post-it notes and things like that, whatever I can get my hands on, just to get those ideas on paper.
Okay.
The actual sitting down and writing the book process is much more planned than that. I try to do that at least once a day.
And when you're doing that, do you have like a specific like word count goal, or just okay, I have all these pieces of notes that I have, I need to get it all in like a coherent
I try
story?
to do about 2,000 words a day.
That's quite a bit, yeah.
It's I don't always meet that, but that's the dream because that's about how long my chapters are.
Okay.
They're not super long. They're digestible, written with a young audience in mind, so they go very quickly.
Okay. And then as you're kind of putting together and piecing together all these notes that you've kind of put down throughout the day, how do you sift through like the good ideas and the bad ones, or are you able to use them all?
Well, I try to use them all. Thankfully, I have a wonderful editor who tells me exactly when the ideas are not as good as I seem to think they are. Um, Her name is Kat Rocha. She's done an amazing job on the Crimson Spark, and I look forward to working with her throughout Vagabond Legacy.
Okay. And then the second book, The Opal Empire, is that coming out soon?
The Opal Embers is going to
Embers,
come
sorry.
out. Is That's okay. The Opal Embers is the draft that I finished most recently. I would call penultimate. It's almost finished. It's missing one or two details. I'm not quite happy with the quality of it just yet. I want it to be polished. I want it to be ready because I have people telling me that they really enjoyed Spark and they found that the characters and the setting and the world were all very engaging. And it's very important to me that Opal Embers be better than the Crimson Spark.
Okay, so let's talk about editing. Like, how many times have you had to gone through the Opal Embers?
The Opal Embers is on its fourth draft, I believe. Crimson Spark went through eight.
Okay.
Yeah. One of those was with an editor. Most of them were just changes in myself growing up, learning what worked and what didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And Embers dramatically has. Sorry, Spark changed a lot more dramatically than Embers has. I've always sort of had an idea of where Embers starts and finishes, what happens along the way. I didn't just start with a character like I did for Spark. Although Embers has most recently undergone a very big change, and I'm looking forward to bringing that to life in the next draft.
Has that changed how the series is going to go forward with the other 6 books planned?
Not yet. No, this has changed. Just this one.
Okay.
Thankfully, I would be very cool if it did change later on down the line. But for now, I think it's just going to be a change that affects Embers.
Okay. I've talked about continuity with other authors that have like 8 or 9 or 10 books, and sometimes that can be a challenge to balance. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you are able to handle that.
Well, thank you. Unlike a lot of other YA novels, The Crimson Spark is a standalone story,
Mm-hmm.
as is The Opal Embers. There isn't a cliffhanger at the end.
Okay.
You're getting a full adventure with a beginning, middle, and end. There's not going to be any to be continued stuff. The Opal Embers, likewise, is going to be a contained adventure. And each book is going to be these new stories that have these characters and new developments that they have to face over the course of their lives.
Okay. So that's good. So why did you decide to write in the speculative fiction genre?
I can't imagine writing in any other genre. Uh, I think that writing uses the imagination on such a primal level that going all out with it is just a waste of time. I mean, not going all out with it is just a waste of time. I think that if you're going to make something up, you better make something up that's fantastical and amazing and that inspires people because your imagination is the greatest the greatest tool you could ever use.
True. And sometimes for me, like when people ask me, like, why do I like fantasy or science fiction or whatever, like for me, it's always a palate cleanser. So I like to get in some other world to help me out. I think it's a great release.
I agree with you. I think escapism is something of a lost art form at this point. I think that the idea of disappearing from the troubles of the world into a story where other characters are experiencing their own adventures for you to enjoy is something everybody needs in times like we live in.
No, I agree. And I also think that no matter what you read, but particularly in fantasy and science fiction, a lot of times it's overcoming obstacles, and sometimes it clears your head, and you can see clearly your own obstacles, and you can take away tips and strengths from different characters.
Yeah. The human experience translates to fantasy just like every other genre, even more so, I think, sometimes. Lloyd Alexander, one of my favorite writers, he once said that fantasy is a means of understanding reality.
Right. And that's so important to be able to understand yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a lot of what the plot of The Crimson Spark is about. It's about understanding yourself in a world that doesn't always make sense.
What are some of the things and challenges that you didn't expect when you sat down and like, okay, I want to write a story?
I didn't think it was going to be as important to me as it wound up being. I find it to be the most fulfilling thing I do. It's something I want to continue doing for the rest of my life. I wasn't expecting to go beyond what I started out with, and I sort of expected this to be maybe just a one-time thing, something I needed to do, but it became an obsession, and I'm very happy about that.
Interesting. So you didn't come out and be like, okay, I want to be a writer for the rest of my life at the beginning.
I think I always wanted to be a creator for the rest of my life, but I don't know about a writer.
Okay. So what other areas would you create in?
Well, I used to I used to do all kinds of art and creativity when I was young, and then I drifted to art to writing. I think because of the potential of it, the unlimited sort of pool of resources that you're working with. You don't have to be contained like you do with other mediums because your reader's imagination doesn't run out of money or resources.
So, what have been some of your creative influences?
Well, Lloyd Alexander is the primary influence. I think everything I do is through the lens of what he did. He is, in my opinion, the greatest fantasy author to ever live and underappreciated in our culture, particularly in fantasy culture.
No, I agree. I read his books when I was very young, and thoroughly enjoyed him. I think I got into him after The Black Cauldron came out in theaters, and then I realized that that wasn't the first book, and so I went back and read the first book and carried on from there.
Right. Yeah. I have young students, and they're all really surprised to learn that there's this whole series behind it. But that idea of coming of age in a fantasy world, I sort of wanted to take that and do what I was feeling at the time, which was a lot of complicated stuff. And the Crimson Spark became this reaction to that. It became coming of age in a world that is confusing.
Right. You said you've been working on it for 10 years. Did you ever get frustrated and want to give up? And
I've gotten frustrated, but I've never wanted to give up because I could always sort of see the characters in my mind, and I feel like giving up would rob them of the chance of being important to somebody because they're very important to me, and I wanted to share them with people, and regardless of whatever obstacles I encounter, I always kept that goal in mind.
no, I think this is good because sometimes people have an idea or a story they want to write, and it takes a while, and they don't understand that sometimes it does. And to keep pressing forward, the only way for you to be not to not be successful is for you to stop. And I think a lot of people stop right
Right.
before the finish line, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you're plotting this first book, The Crimson Spark, how long did it take you before you're like, okay, I need to sit down and plot this?
Well, I wrote the first draft blank, like from
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And as I wrote it, I began to get ideas, and I kept them all in this big file folder, which I still have, and it's now got it's gotten much bigger. It's gotten all the ideas from the other books in there, and I would incorporate the ideas that I came up with for later in the story as the story went on. Then I did a full rewrite with all the ideas incorporated, and then I did another full rewrite that was transitioning to a different perspective, and then I did another rewrite that had both characters' perspectives, and that was the one that eventually wound its way into the hands of the editor.
I like this as well because it takes a lot of work to be a writer, and the days of just well, I think people for sure have a romanticized idea of what a writer is, and it is a lot of hard work.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to it's hard to simultaneously be lazy and a writer, uh, which is a pretty accurate description of my own personality.
So after the book was done, how hard was it to find an editor that you felt was competent?
Oh, not hard at all. I instantly knew that I wanted this editor specifically. It took a while because I did try to go through traditional channels at first. I wanted to get it published traditionally. I was sort of living in 2004 in my head. Uh, I thought that was just the way you did it. I went through a lot of agents and a lot of queries and a lot of mixed feelings before I finally decided to just go independent and just release it myself through Amazon, because that was what I saw a lot of great new creators doing, like David Stewart and Adam Smith, and I was inspired by them, and I decided to do that, and I instantly knew that I wanted Kat Rocha to be the editor because she had this YouTube show where she would give these scathing criticisms of bad comics and movies and fiction, and I instantly wanted somebody as harsh and as perceptive as she was, because I needed Spark to be. It couldn't just be good. I needed it to be excellent, and I needed an editor that would tell me when things were terrible for that. And unfortunately, a lot of editors um, will give you a bit more leeway than you need as a
Mm-hmm.
writer. And thankfully, Cat is not one of them.
Oh, that's good. So you reached out to her, and was she immediately like, "Yeah, I'll look at your stuff"?
Yeah, yeah. It was pretty quick.
And then you said you have a audiobook narrator, and how did you reach out to him?
Well, I grew up listening to Vic Mignogna in shows like Dragon Ball Z and Full Metal Alchemist. I was a big fan of him, always was. When COVID hit and all the conventions were canceled, I knew that he would have a bit more free time in his schedule. So I thought I might as well take the chance and reach out to him. And working with him has been an incredible pleasure. He's one of the nicest, most genuine people I've encountered. He's so professional and such a hard worker. And I think that he brought a voice to Spark that even I wasn't quite sure was there. And if you haven't tried out the audio production of Spark, even if you've read the whole book 1,000 times like I have, you can still listen to that audio production and be very moved by the way he brings these characters to life. It's really something else.
Nice. Speaking of COVID, this year, the Crimson Spark came out in 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
How has COVID affected that?
It's given me it's given me a lot more time to work on stuff. I launched my second novels, Indiegogo, because people were all stuck at home, and uh, I figured fiction was something people would need to get through all this nonsense. I did a bit of a drive with Spark when COVID first hit, giving copies out to people who needed it because of the lockdown, and I had a very positive reception to that. A lot of people stuck with me even after uh, now that COVID's dying down. Even I have a lot of people that remember that and stayed as a part of my audience, and I'm very grateful to them. But my second novel was planned to be The Opal Empress, and because of COVID, I decided to because of COVID and some issues in the life of some of the staff of the people I work with. I wound up not being able to do Embers for another year, so I went with this other idea, which was VCW, and I'm very happy with the response that's gotten.
Nice. I know that some indie authors depend and rely not only on Amazon but on going to conventions and stuff. So, and that kind of all shut down. So I was just wondering if that affected you at all.
Not really. I don't usually go to conventions. I don't. I'm not an especially social person at the best of times. I like to just make the books and put them out there. Obviously, I'll answer any questions or talk to anybody who reaches out to me. But the idea of going to a convention just never appealed to me. I think it's partially being a bit of a germaphobe.
How have you been able to stay current on marketing on Amazon?
Well, I actually don't use Amazon's advertisement service. I use Facebook's, and I find that the returns on that are a lot more reliable.
Okay.
Because with an Amazon ad, people will see it, but you don't, and sometimes they'll click on it, but you don't really have that interaction. If you share something as an ad on Facebook and Instagram, people can reply in the comments, they can message you personally, and you can reply to them, which I think creates this. It breaks down this barrier between the creator and the art that I think is something that a lot of mediums need to do to adjust to the way independent fiction is now being released.
So is that just something you came up with, or was it something you read or heard about that people were doing?
There's a lot of really creative and talented indie authors on social media that sort of spitball the ideas of what works and what doesn't off of each other. I can't remember if it was one of them that gave me the idea, or if it was from one of the Facebook groups I'm in or something like that. But it's definitely worked, and I'm very grateful.
Nice. So, do you have any tips on how you stay balanced in your life when you're juggling work and writing and everything like that?
It's good if you have a job that gives you a lot of time to work on personal projects for sure. Thankfully, I'm a teacher, so I have summers to write basically.
So, do you try to get you the bulk of your writing during that time?
I do, yeah.
And then, what do you do the rest of the year? Is that more spent on the editing and
Editing,
the marketing?
yeah. I try to write the drafts over the summer and then edit them and release them over the year. Unfortunately, finding employment during all this stuff has been kind of crazy, and it delayed VCW to a point that I'm obviously disappointed that I couldn't release it to. It was supposed to come out in March. I'm again, very sorry to all the backers, but I'm looking forward to delivering it to them, and I hope it's going to be something that they enjoy.
Nice. Do you have any current authors that you read that you like that you kind of
Yes,
influence
yes,
you?
a lot of them. Christopher Rocchio, in particular, has been a huge influence in me, not just in his writing, but in his the way he deals with customers and fans. He is a science fiction author. He wrote Empire of Silence, Howling Dark, Demon in White, Lesser Devil. He's an incredible author, and he's also a very, very, very outgoing person, very eager to help new creators, and great with his fans and customers. And I learned a lot of what I do from the way he behaves. And Adam Smith is another person. Adam Smith wrote uh, Maxwell Kane Burrito Avenger, and he writes the Dios Vos Wastelander series. His work and his attitude towards writing as escapism and an antidote to mental illness also influenced me quite a lot.
Nice. Is there any resources that you'd recommend to new writers?
YouTube, definitely.
YouTube?
And
Anyone in
yeah,
particular?
there are, yes. Christopher Rocchio is obviously one of them. Adam Smith has a YouTube channel. David V. Stewart, the author of Voices of the Void, Eyes on the Walls, and the Needle Ash books, it has a huge YouTube channel where he gives his advice on and his techniques on writing and on marketing, and his sort of crash course in being an indie author. And I would say that's almost mandatory watching for anybody who wants to publish independently these days.
Oh, fantastic. Do you have any tips or tricks?
Tips or tricks? Um, don't be afraid to do anything that you think might be met with a mixed response. Don't talk down to your readers. They came with you on this. They're ready for whatever you can throw at them. And and I would also say that people need to look at writing more as a service industry.
Mm-hmm.
When we write, we are and we publish ourselves, we're marketing to customers. And
Right.
like every service industry, the customer is always right.
Mm-hmm.
Customer feedback is incredibly important. And if you stop listening to the customer, like I think a lot of mainstream corporations are doing, then you lose that enthusiasm, that groundswell of fan interest, and they'll go find something else. So keeping and maintaining a loyal audience has to do with trusting and respecting the fans.
Nice. So, being an independent author, you're in control of every aspect of what goes on in your production, basically.
That would be
Um,
nice.
what are you not totally involved?
No, I'm not. I mean, even when you're in charge of the story, as much as you might like to think you're in charge of the story, your characters can still surprise you.
Oh no, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But you are in charge of making sure a book comes out and making sure your
Oh
cover
yeah,
art.
the marketing ship. Yeah.
Yeah, you have cover art that you have to do. You have editing, audio production. You have to take control of all of that. Have you
hmm
found that challenging? Like, how did you find a cover
Um,
artist?
it's not as challenging as people might think. I think a lot of writers are intimidated by it because when you don't go through the traditional channels, when you publish independently, all of a sudden you're not just the writer, you're also the lead marketing person, you're the social media personalities, you're doing all this stuff on top of it. But that's really necessary right now in the way that media is, in the way that social media is. And I would say that if you're just out there and you're yourself, you're genuine, then you don't need to worry about anything because it comes naturally.
I actually like that a lot. Like, you kind of took the fear out of people. To be able to be themselves and to just kind of sit down and enjoy the process, I and be comfortable. I think people would like to hear that advice. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think customers respect when people are genuine with them always,
Mm-hmm.
and they can tell when people are not being genuine with them. And I think that's another thing about readers that's so wonderful is that they are the deciding factor. They're the makers or breakers in the industry.
So true. So your editor you reached out to. You had one in mind, and you reached out to her, and she picked up your book, and then your narrator for your audible book or for your audio book reached out to him. He said yes. How did you go about finding the artist for your covers? Because they are fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you. I am very proud of the covers. The cover artist of my books is an artist from the Philippines named Jesse, and he is so talented. I love working with him. Um, I found him through, actually, I did a contest of trying to find a cover that best fit the story. I put the idea out there, and I had a bunch of different creativity firms, if you, I guess you could call them,
Mm-hmm.
submit ideas. And his was just the one that spoke to me the most, and so I've had him do the whole series.
Nice. I mean, that silhouette of the two um, young teens with the hand underneath reaching out to him, like that just looks awesome.
There's a Yeah, there's a sense of wonder to it, and there's a sense of dread, and that is the Crimson Spark. So I'm
Yeah.
very grateful to him.
And then the opal embers just look fantastic with that dragon and the four characters
Yeah,
sitting.
and I got to tell you, they just keep getting better and better. They're each cover is more dynamic and engaging than the last one.
So was it hard to pick him, or did he just rise above the rest?
No, instantly rose above the rest. I was kind of pussyfooting around it a little bit, and I had a friend of mine that says, yeah, I think you've already made your decision. The one you keep showing to people is probably the one that you're going to go with, and he was right. He was absolutely right.
Fantastic. Yeah, they're beautiful. So you chose right,
Yeah,
but
thank
you
you.
already know that. Do you have any other like sort of geeky hobby that influenced the way you write or influenced stories?
Oh yeah, I love gaming and I love anime. I love professional wrestling. Those are all huge influences on my writing. It's obviously the wrestling one because my second book VCW is about wrestling. It's a fantasy book about wrestling. There are not a whole lot of those. That's where I sort of channeled a lot of the interest I have in that
Mm-hmm.
subject.
Actually, I'm going to reach out to some professional wrestlers and see if they'll get on with me because they have a very unique way of storytelling. Like a wrestling match is a story in itself, and I
Absolutely.
love it. And
It's a very unique form of storytelling and of art. It's a performance art piece in a lot of ways, and I think that it takes a lot of skill and a lot of dedication, and it's
right.
underappreciated.
And when I was growing up in the '80s, Sting was my favorite wrestler, and
We've got that in common then.
and I always hated it because Ric Flair was always the champion. That bad guy was always the
Hmm.
champion. And I remember watching Sting when he won at Great American Bash, and he won, and like such the thrill that you had when he won, it was so fantastic. And I was always mad as a little kid, like I hate Ric Flair, like why is he the champion? But now as I'm older and want to be a storyteller, I look back and be like, well, that's why people hated him, and it's made such good conflict.
Yeah, and I think that is something a lot of writers can benefit and learn from. The whole idea of putting someone over as a villain, and having them be dominant and overpowering, being this huge obstacle that the hero has to overcome, is something that's sort of fallen by the wayside in a lot of modern storytelling. And I think it's something that wrestling does very well, and we could learn a thing or two from it.
For sure, yeah. I mean, watching Ric Flair, he would win by any means possible, and
Hmm.
lie away still is and cheat his way into the championship. And so,
And that was what made that such a great rivalry. Is you had this sort of backhanded, sneaky guy, and then you had Sting, who was this all-American hero, always do the right thing. And when he finally overcomes that huge obstacle, you feel like you were on that journey with him.
oh yeah, no, and they do a really good job, and that's why I wanted to interview like professional wrestlers because of that storytelling. But not only that, all the outside ring promotion and all that, but inside the match itself, like it ebbs and flows, and the bad guy's going to win. Oh no, the good guy's going to win. So
Hmm.
it's a fantastic way.
Yeah, no, there's the best matches have the three-act structure. It's storytelling on a primal level, and I think that's what draws creative people, writers, artists to enjoying it as a medium. And I would recommend it to anybody who is sort of still working out basic storytelling structure, things like that. It's a great little guide
Yeah,
to
for
that.
sure. And if you could look behind me, I mean, you can't see me, but I got Sting figurines. I got Ultimate Warrior. I got Lex Luger. I got the Steiner Bros.
Very cool,
My
very cool.
I Yeah, I was a
WCW fan.
huge WCW fan growing up. I I wasn't a
Yeah.
big WWF fan at that time. That's what it was called. And they had good characters. I mean, you had Hogan, but he was the good guy and he always had the championship. So I didn't think it had. Yeah.
And he always won. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not interesting.
When the Ultimate Warrior came along and they met at, I was, yeah, WrestleMania 6. I
Six.
think I was 12 at the time, maybe a little younger. But when you had two good guys coming at it and you thought, well, maybe Hulk Hogan's the bad guy. Like, I thought that was very good storytelling on their part. But that didn't last very long.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, I wasn't actually born when WrestleMania 6 happened, but I when I discovered that I liked wrestling, I went back and I watched everything WWF and WCW, and I was very attached to a lot of the storytelling aspects, and I think that one of the reasons Spark turned out as well as it did was that I had discovered sort of the master class in understanding dynamics between characters and writing scenes in that ultimate cheat sheet that is professional wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing is they do such a good job developing characters and creating characters.
Mm-hmm. And what's amazing about it is that it's not driven by a singular creative figure. The people who are wrestling, they are the people who are defining their characters. They're the ones giving the promos and deciding how they react to every new conflict, and it's very dynamic and changing because of that. And I think in that regard, it's not really like a lot of other mediums.
True, and they have very very interesting character development. Like let's go back to Sting. Like he was the surfer boy with the face paint, and then when the NWO hit,
and then the NWO shows up,
yeah,
and he just
he changed.
transforms.
Yeah,
that is about my favorite story. I think one of my favorite stories in all of wrestling is Sting's sort of fall and his return from the shadows. I think that is so classic and well told, even though it ended sort of poorly. I think that it was probably one of the most influential things I've ever seen in wrestling.
yeah. Well, the whole NWO storyline was fantastic, I thought.
Yeah, really, really great.
You said you're a gamer. What do you like to play?
Well, I like to play things with stories, obviously. Really good stories are a huge selling point to me. I'm a big fan of Yoko Taro's games. I'm a big fan of Swery, of Kojima, Suda 51. And in terms of Western stuff, I like the epic stuff. I like Halo.
Mm-hmm.
I like Fallout, that sort of thing. Skyrim.
So it kind of sounds like you've had a very the Asian culture has kind of influenced you a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Both Japanese games and Japanese television and Japanese books have all been really big influences on the Crimson Spark and its aesthetic and the way that it's structured. And that was one of the reasons I thought that Vic Mignogna would make such a great narrator. Is he has an intimate knowledge of the anime format, and I thought that he would do a really good job.
So do you have any recommendations? Like if somebody is like, I want to learn storytelling, but I want to look at it through like an Eastern perspective. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, I would say start simple. Start with shonen manga, because it doesn't get any more simple than that, and that has been around and that has been successful for so many years because it works and it's engaging and it appeals to a very large audience. And there's something about it that clicks with people, even in the West. I grew up during the boom of all these Japanese animes coming over to the United States, and it had a big influence on how I am as a writer.
No, I agree. Like Full Metal Alchemist, I think if you want to learn magic and magic systems, I think that's a great place to start about that.
Mm-hmm. The world building in Full Metal Alchemist is exceptional. I would definitely recommend that to anybody. And if you watch it in English, it stars Mr. Vic Mignogna.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you getting on with me tonight. Tell people how they can find you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. You can find me on Instagram. I'm Mr. Will Hastings. You can find me on Amazon, obviously, and Audible. And my website is tgrpress.org. You can join my mailing list there and stay updated on everything. I try to post on Instagram as much as I can whenever there's a new update. And I really enjoy interacting with people there.
Perfect. Thanks again for getting on with me.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.